1987 when Randy and Noble's paper come out, it's all overlapping generation model in a version or another. There are many different versions. One is that, brutally. There are other versions more sophisticated. Then there is a version which is like overlapping generation model, only doesn't look like, which is known as the Townsend Turnpike. Okay? Let me give you the model in a graphical form because I'm not going to discuss the model. These are all tentatives to write variation model where people hold a useless asset, okay? And they focus on one aspect of the thing called money, which is it's an anonymous token accepted by people independently from the identity of the person giving it. All right? So one way of doing it is you can imagine that we are living on a strange belt which is subdivided in section I minus 1, I plus 1. This goes this direction. Eventually out there, very far, at infinity, the blue and the black connect. But they connect only at infinity. So maybe we go back. Okay? And when two individuals cross at a point here, those traveling this way and those traveling this way, they look at each other. This has some good and this has some other good. Okay? If one of the two likes the other guy's good, they like to transact. I like your good, I will like your good, but you don't like mine. Okay? So if that's the situation, we don't trade. So in this situation, we keep going around and around and around in circle until I have a banana and I want an apple, until I finally find somebody with an apple that wants a banana. And then we trade. It's one of the millions of ways in which you can write a mathematical or physical model of double coincidence of bonds. All right? Well, if apart from the banana, I also have a token, I can give you the token. And if you believe, for whatever magical reason, that the next person you find, right, will take the token, you take my token and then you exchange it for the goods you need. If you take the circle model of coconuts of different colors with which the initial search model are built, it's just, this story can have many geographical or physical or entertainment park representation, okay? And then it's again the same matter. So there is dozens of models like that, okay? What kind of insight do they provide? Always the same, and frankly, I don't think it's relevant to understand any of these questions. Yes, having a commonly accepted medium of exchange reduces transaction cost. I completely agree. Let's move on. Also because this thing does not explain at all why that token and not the other. The answer in these models is in some form of self-fulfilling equilibrium. People's expectations, that's the analogy with bubbles and symbols. People's expectations coordinate on a token and not on another, on a symbol and not on another. To the extent that everybody believes that that particular symbol will be accepted, that particular symbol becomes a currency. Okay? It's not by chance that these are the same years in which, you remember I mentioned in the other lecture, economics is a bit interconnected. It's not all people working, right? I mentioned to you at the end of the other lecture on overlapping generation model that in the late 70s, early 80s, people started to work on multiplicity and indeterminacy of equilibrium in overlapping generation model. And the technical tool was to show that If you're outside of a Eurasian system in which there is a market for everything, one way in which you determine equilibrium today is by coordinating in some form on expectation about the future. Right? And depending on how your expectation about the future moves, you may have an equilibrium or another. Many things, many different things can become an equilibrium, depending on how your expectations and the shared expectation about the future move around. So you may have signals, arbitrary signals, that act as coordination device of the way you predict the future, that to the extent that they are accepted by everybody, they shift the equilibrium. All right? That's the general notion of indeterminacy. And, you know, David Levine and Tim Keogh showed how it works and how it doesn't work with overlapping generation. David Cass and Carl Schell did the same for general equilibrium model, variation model with incomplete markets, and so on. There is a bunch of people, I would say these are the first people proving decent theorems. There's a bunch of people that provide one example or another. Some examples are more fashionable than others, some examples are more elegant, simpler to understand, but I would say, you know, one has to give credit where credit belongs, and the two pairs of people that did the theory properly for first are them, okay? Other people then extended, made theorems more systematic. I mean, Andrea Mascolella has a bunch of theorems in how to avoid indeterminacy in very general, you know, economies with lattice. I mean, even myself and Luigi worked on how to prove local uniqueness, but there is a period that starts in the late 70s, early 80s, that go through the beginning of the 90s, in which people explore this. Then Tirol, Bubbles paper on econometrica, Santos and Woodford paper on bubbles in also econometrica. They're all related, okay? They're all related. One particular branch says, oh, that's the explanation of money, okay? Where money is interpreted as a symbolic coordination device that I carry and everybody accepts because everybody expects that everybody else accepts. From that point of view, the fact that you carry money, this is an observation Arianna Kocherlakota made in a paper called Money's Memory, also worth looking at, but then if you think about for a moment, you understand it's not talking about the money we talk about when we say, you know, BCE issued $20 billion in exchange for this and that. Narayana correctly points out that these symbolic tokens are a memory. They're a memory, they're a synthetic memory, what in statistics you would call a sufficient statistics of all your past transactions. Okay? In a world like that, in particular, or in a variation of a world like that, your net money position at any point in time is a synthesis of your past transaction. I don't need to know whom you transact with, but I can know if you're solvable or not just by looking at your money holdings. Right? So there is no doubt that to the extent that a certain unit of currency is commonly accepted, and you have a reliable way of showing me your unit of currency and how much you own, that is a memory of all your past transactions, right? Is the bottom line in your financial position. The problem is that I can show you this, I can show you this, I can show you this, or I can take you to my computer and show you my X account in the X bank, and they're very different summaries of my position. This is expressed in euros, and some people accept it, some people don't. I don't have a dollar with me. This is charged on a US dollar account, this is charged on a euro account. And the question is, why some people accept the euro and some people accept the dollar? Because when a week ago, the one expressed in euro was not working, and I was at a restaurant in Venice and I charged the one express in dollar, the machine said euro or dollar. Wasn't indifferent, and gave me an exchange rate. And it was good that that bank was accepting both. If mine were Zimbabwe dollars or whatever Venezuelan, I suppose they're called Chavez. What's the currency of Venezuela? I don't even remember. It's so worthless that it's not worth remembering what its name is. Oh yeah, Bolivar probably, sure. Simon Bolivar, poor bastard, they had insulted him left and right. They might even have called a worthless currency with his name, right? The Bolivar, you know, they probably, if I was in Bolivar, he says, I'm not sure I take Bolivar, sir, I'll take euros. Instead I said, oh, charge it in dollars. Why am I saying so? That all these theories do not explain why you keep having a currency that is specific to certain political entities, not economic entities. But the euro may be the first long-lasting tentative of introducing a currency. Coconut models people should love the euro, because euro is a tentative to introduce a common currency accepted by people transacting on markets in a union of political entities that are not a common political entity. Right? And in fact, I have to say that all the troubles that the euro has is because it tries to do something which is halfway between what currency have always been, symbols of a political entity, and what economic theory of a certain penchant tries to claim, that they're just symbolic transaction devices accepted as a sunspot by everybody. Okay? We can go think about it. If you start thinking about the euro along this line, lots of other things become very clear. And it also makes extremely clear why there is a strong connection, like it or not, both in theory and practice, between the money you issue and the public debt you issue. Because to the extent that they are claims and debt position of the same entity, then you understand that there is a connection. But we'll go to that Thursday. Okay? So let's go along with the search theory. So the search theory asks these questions. Some of these questions really don't make any sense. They're pseudo-naive questions that once you rephrase them properly, have a very straightforward answer. There is no reason why you should study money as opposed to cars, houses, furniture, CDs, or cell phones. I hold probably more value in cell phones than I hold in cash. Okay? And I don't ask myself why I hold cell phones that are rate of return dominated. Okay? All right, in fact, you know, you can go read, and I invite you to read. In fact, I would like that next Thursday we start with some of your questions if you have read the Williamson and Bright model. Okay? So we go a little bit into the details of that. That's the only thing I want to go into the details, right? But I would like you to understand that it's all part of this, okay? It's all this. And as you notice, in fact, it's very interesting that literature has produced a large quantity of models, in fact, an enormous quantity of models, because it has an objective complication. And what's the objective complication? The objective complication is that because of technical reason, purely technical modeling reason, mathematical reason, the models are extremely simple. But they're extremely simple because they force individuals to do very strange things, such as carry only 1 unit of money, and therefore have a problem when they meet in the search thing of having a fixed ratio between the good and the quantity of money you have. Because there is no competition and there is always a one-to-one thing, that becomes a very rigid model because you have to end up with a bargaining thing. And if you start thinking and all that, sure there is bargaining in the real world, sure there is search, but is that essential? Does that play a role? I understand that this is what makes economics confusing to many people, but you have to think about, is that the aspect that makes monetary prices moving around? The fact that we bargain? Like when you're using your cash? And in fact, if you look at the second generation of those models, in order to overcome that, you have this very artificial construct that is very hard to map into things you observe between a set of Eurasian markets where most of the action take place. Right, the day and the night, the people that trading one, the people trading the other, the bonds and so on. And then there is this strange market in which, for whatever reason, people have this fantastic technology, they do everything for Asia, and then they go around buying ice cream with some little coins in their pocket. And we call that the monetary economy. And you think of it a bit and says, okay, I understand the sophistication, I understand it's even creative from the point of view of creating a story, but it's not capturing what's, right? So study that paper, ask me the question, but I'm not going to spend a lot because I don't think it helps understanding what's going on, okay? I don't think it helps a lot understanding what's going on. You all look like you're getting ready to go. Given that I announced I'm going to, we can stop in 2 minutes. Let me tell you one thing. So part of this literature insists, and this is the last message I want to give, then we'll go back to this Thursday. Part of this literature, in fact, a lot of this literature insists that in a very ambiguous terminology, money has to be a primitive. Here, let me be a bit of a philosopher. What does it mean in economics that something is a primitive? Have you ever thought about this whole thing about microfoundation? What does it mean that money is something that is or is not a primitive in our economy?
It's like a basic characteristic that we cannot do.
Very good. So some people say money is a primitive. I tend to think like that. Why? Because I say legal and institutional constraints are a primitive, at least when I'm trying to do monetary policy, at least when I'm trying to do business cycle, at least when I'm doing development or economic growth, okay? Not if I'm trying to do the history of institution, but if I'm trying to study, say, growth and cycles, I take the institutional framework as given. I'm not going to start discussing the institutional framework, otherwise it's a regression to infinity, and I'm always asking, why are there rational numbers? Or why is there something as opposed to nothing? Right? You always end up with a stupid question or interesting question, depending which point of view you take, that you know has no answer, and you never get anywhere. So I have to cut off and decide what the primitive are and what the primitive are not, depending on the question I'm asking. So people say, okay, no, money cannot be a primitive. You cannot take it as given. Well, why? Because the givens are the technology and the taste. Why are they given by nature? You understand, there is here a huge philosophical misconception that is extremely widespread around economists, especially Anglo-Saxon, and it's one thing that makes us weak to criticism from other sciences, from other fields, and it makes the whole apparatus of economics weak for no reason. Because the interesting thing is that the analytical tools of economics are actually very useful to understand exactly that. Why money is or is not a primitive. Why preferences are or are not a primitive. Why technology is or is not a primitive. Nothing is a primitive. The Big Bang probably is a primitive. And some laws of the universe assuming they exist. Okay? So yes, I have certain institution, and I can ask why I have certain institution by asking an historical determined question. Why have those institutions come around? If I start from the situation before the institution, may I see some laws of human interaction at work that produce, say, trade laws of a certain type, debt contract of a certain type, and therefore tools such as money of a certain type, right? But if I'm asking how does the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve Bank post 985 work, I'll take the Federal Reserve System as given as a primitive and screw you. Okay? And I'm not going to ask why do I have a Federal Reserve System. I take its rules, I take the way it works, and I say that's money, and I'm going to write models of that. If I'm asking why did they create the Federal Reserve System in 20, I think, 22? God now, 17, something like that. I don't remember. Somewhere there before the Great Depression, but I cannot remember the exact year in this moment. Then I want to ask, how does a banking system, like the unregulated banking system of the time, without a lender of last resort work? You see what I mean? So there is a form of religiosity in this, about primitive or not primitive, that is really meaningless. Because there is no sense in which technologies are primitives. Why are they primitives? They change over time. They're the product of economic incentive. They're economic institution and human institution. We create them. There is no technology that has ever worked without laws and rules and institution and property rights, and those are creation of humans. Exactly like money. I don't see any difference between my title of my house that is enforced in court, blah, 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 right? Or a debt contract, or the fact that you have habeas corpus and money. He has the right not to be my slave, and I have the right not to be his slave. That's a social agreement. Exactly like, you know, if I have to buy something from him, I give him 20 bucks. What's the difference between the two? None of them is a primitive, both are a primitive, depending on what I'm studying.